An independent Canadian journalist has caused a stir in the media by accusing mainstream outlets of reporting the opposite of what's actually happening in Aleppo. Now, after an emotional speech at the UN, Eva Bartlett was accused of spreading pro-Russian propaganda. Some media outlets went on to claim that she has even been paid by RT. We asked Eva to respond to those accusations.
I maintain that what I am writing and what I'm reporting and whom I'm citing are Syrian civilians who I've encountered in Syria. If people do not wish to hear the voices of Syrian civilians, and if they want to maintain their narrative, which is in line with the NATO narrative, which is in line with destabilizing Syria and vilifying the government of Syria and ignoring the overwhelming wishes of the people of Syria, then they do this by accusing me of spreading propaganda. I am a freelance journalist. I have the right to contribute to whomever I wish. I submit an article to Russia Today Op Edge, and they decide whether or not they wish to run it, and that's how it works.
Now, we invited Dili Hussein, deputy editor of the Muslim news website 5 Pillars UK, and Eva Bartlett to outline their views on the situation in Syria.
We've got activists and civilians tweeting and posting videos from eastern Aleppo stating that only a minority of civilians have been evacuated, but the vast majority are still stuck in eastern Aleppo, being bombed and shelled by the regime, as well as Russian air forces.
First of all, I'd like to know how many civilians are the guest believes are in eastern areas of Aleppo. The United Nations for years has said 250,000, yet to the contrary of what the guest said, that a minority of civilians have been evacuated. At least 90,000, it could be now 100,000, have been evacuated from eastern areas of Aleppo. This is documented, and these people are actually saying quite the opposite of what our guest is saying about people who have come out of eastern areas of Aleppo had said that they had tried to leave eastern Aleppo but were prevented by the terrorists.
You've only been hosted by the regime. You've not entered any rebel-held areas, and you can't reject every opposition by calling them Al-Qaeda, Eva. You just can't do that.
You are saying that I'm rejecting what's happening on the ground. I am saying I'm citing sources on the ground, which include Syrian journalists. And if you are going to say that the Syrian journalists on the ground are not credible, then that is your opinion.
The UN's Syria Humanitarian Task Force Chairman, Jan Egeland, has praised Russia's role. Let's just quickly listen to what he said.
We are now getting round-the-clock help from the Russian military, and we think we will be able to monitor and assist those evacuations that should follow.
It's all good and well Russia trying to play the hero now after bombing innocent people. I'll take what the UN says with a pinch of salt.
All these claims of massacre of, say, 82 people in eastern Aleppo stem from a UN spokesperson. Every independent media outlet, every media outlet that has cited this, cite the UN as the source, and the UN themselves provide no sources. They only say, we've been told. So you don't take what they say with a grain of salt, and at the same time, you're making the same accusations which stem back to the UN. Let me ask you, sir, have you ever addressed the 11,000 civilians in Aleppo who've been murdered by terrorists of al-Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham, Nuruddin al-Zinki, the Free Syrian Army, and other militant factions in eastern Aleppo who've been daily firing gas canister bombs, water heater bombs, Grad missiles, who've been firing explosive bullets, who've been sniping at civilians? These are indiscriminate. Have you ever spoken about this?
Where have you pulled that
differentiate between it? I pulled that out from the head of forensics, Dr. Zahar Hadjo, who has every single name documented of the civilians, and these are 11,000 civilians.
Regime hosted
Excuse
you,
me,
did
sir,
they give you that information?
this is my turn to speak. I'm citing Dr. Zahar Hadjo, who's the head of forensics, who has every name documented. And this is not unnamed activists. This is not the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights in Coventry, UK. This is somebody who's in Aleppo, in the morgue in Aleppo, and he's documented all these civilians.
Now, I feel watching both of you here as this pretty well sums up the conflict in that there are two very opposing perspectives, which brings me on to media coverage, which a lot of people are quoting in the public especially.
When I see news about about Syria from Russia Today or from Press TV, I know that they are merely pushing propaganda to protect the Assad regime. When Syria has been happening, when you take news, you have to question where is that news coming from. Eva is a pro-Assad propagandist, and essentially I take what she's saying barely with a pinch of salt.
Everybody's a propagandist, according to Dili. How do you respond to that, Eva?
I have listed sources who are on the ground who are neither Russia Today nor Syrian media, but the guest does not seem to think they're They're credible, although they're on the ground, as I was on the ground, although they're taking testimonies, as I have taken testimonies, although they are in Syria, as the guest is not in Syria. Simply write off anybody who's on the ground reporting, including Russia Today, including independent journalists, as propagandists. That's a very mainstream tactic.